Brilliant. Okay, so it's a pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Oliver Dodd. I am one of the co-founders and currently the chief operating officer of Nucleate, which is a biotech nonprofit on a mission to empower the next generation of biotech leaders. And it's my pleasure today to tell you a little bit about the collaboration that we have with Lilly, in particular, the 2025 Grand Challenge with a focus on women's health and genetic medicine. So what is the Grand Challenge? It's a two-day event at Lilly headquarters. It's going to be happening on September 4th this year. There's a $100,000 grant that will be awarded to one prize. But more importantly, all of the semifinalists, the 10 teams that will select to come to Lilly HQ for this two-day partnering event, will have the opportunity to gain mentorship and feedback from Lilly executives and scientists across pretty much every aspect of their business unit, which is a really unique experience. And in a moment after I get through this part, I'm sure that Jennifer and Trey can sort of speak to just the value of just attending the competition. Even if you aren't selected to be one of the winners. So there are two major tracks this year for the Lilly Grand Challenge. Of course, every year we will always have a genetic medicine track, given that the Gen Med business unit at Lilly was the one that was foundational in driving our partnership. So on that side, as usual, we're very interested in novel delivery technologies, regenerative medicine, as well as neuroscience applications. And the new track that we're highlighting this year is really in women's health. And when we say women's health, we don't just mean fertility, reproductive health, et cetera. Of course, reproductive health is one of the important subtracks that we're focused on. We've also widened that scope and looking at indications and diseases where women are more likely to be affected or have worse outcomes. So in particular, we've highlighted two autoimmune diseases and cardiometabolic health that Lilly finds of particular interest. However, and I'll just note this a couple times throughout and probably while I'm answering the questions, we are really looking for, Lilly is very excited to look at a very broad scope of applications, both in terms of their stage. So in the past, we've had people go all the way from, back of idea on napkin to clinical stage, as well as in the particular indication space that they're focused on. So, if you have a women's health application that's not strictly within one of these three subtracks, like we're still interested to receive your application and you certainly should still apply. So just another FAQ, just to get out of the way. Is this just for women's health? No. Anyone with any technology that touches the main or subtracks is eligible to apply. What is the Lilly Grand Challenge? The Lilly Grand Challenge is a two-day event at Lilly HQ where 10 teams will have the chance to connect with senior leadership at Lilly and present their science. All expenses will be covered. Lilly will award one team $100,000 in non-dilutive funding to support their technology development, no strings or conditions attached. Select teams will also gain access to Lilly's network of scientific and business expertise. Who is eligible? How do I apply? Any technology at any stage with a broad application to women's health or genetic medicine is welcome to apply. The application is very simple, should take you 10 to 15 minutes to fill out. And if you are one of our activator teams, you can probably just reuse your program materials. There is no affiliation with Nucleate necessary to apply. So we really want you to tell your friends, your colleagues, even if you aren't part of Nucleate's activator cohort or any of our programs, we're really casting a very wide net here. International teams are also welcome to apply this year, which is new. And people always ask, what's the catch? In this case, there is no catch. The materials are submitted. The materials which you submit must be non-confidential. Lilly gets no right to your IP. All expenses are paid for the trip, and the $100,000 grant comes with no conditions and is transferred from Nucleate to your organization. Why should you apply to the Grand Challenge? So this is actually one of our prior year winners, Dr. Julie Saba, who'll be joining us on an info session next week if you're interested to hear her story. And she was talking a lot about not only the monetary support that they've received, but really the incredible networking opportunity that they had when they attended the event to really gain access to a lot of the folks at Lilly that can help drive a future partnership or collaboration. And I'm sure that Trey and Jennifer can talk a little bit to this as well later on in the presentation. Okay, so the event is the 3rd and 4th of September at Lilly HQ in Indy. This is just a great picture from last year's challenge in Gen Med and neuroscience. And you can see here on the agenda just a sampling of some of the folks that we're bringing in from Lilly. So, as far up as Andrew Adams, who right now is their CSO in the Gen Med side, as well as a lot of folks that are involved in their gateway labs, venture team, business development units, explore R&D, et cetera. Quick recap of last year's Grand Challenge. So we had 128 applications. 53% of these were external to Nucleate. So it's not uncommon that we get folks that are not affiliated with Nucleate applying, and we encourage that. Only 31% of those teams were incorporated, and many of them had planned to incorporate in the future. So you do not need to be incorporated to apply for this challenge. If you do win the challenge as an unincorporated team, Nucleate can hold the money for you for up to 12 months while you incorporate. And then the money does eventually need to be transferred to an incorporated entity. We selected 10 semifinalist teams from this pool. So with that, I'm going to open up the stage, and I apologize, Trey. I didn't have time to add your picture to this graphic. Trey was a last-minute addition from the team, but we're very excited that he was able to come and join us today to talk alongside Jennifer about Orion Therapeutics' experience in the 2023 Grand Challenge. And they were, in fact, one of the recipients of the $100,000 non-dilutive award. So with that, I'd love to pass it off to Trey and then Jennifer to give a quick introduction about themselves and maybe one or two sentences about what Orion Therapeutics does. So Trey, off to you.
Sure. Well, to start, Orion Therapeutics is a genetic medicine company, and more specifically, we are a drug delivery company. So you can see how we fit into the Genetic Medicine Grand Challenge during our year of submission. And we have a novel lipid-based nanoparticle delivery platform that is versatile, that can deliver virtually any type of nucleic acid payload, so mRNA, sRNA, so on and so forth. And we're currently developing a lead asset in vascular disease using a targeted form of our delivery platform that goes to vascular injury. As far as my background, cell and molecular biology, got my PhD from the University of Tennessee, where this specific delivery technology was patented. I worked as a director of formulation in the CDMO space for several years and sort of cut my teeth in industry and saw how you sort of take a idea that is enveloped in a lot of academic work and actually make it into a reality with GMP manufacturing and IND enabling studies and some very formidable drug development work to get across the IND and eventually to commercialization. And so it was kind of that experience that enlightened me, that said, hey, that technology I developed back at the University of Tennessee, this can be something. So went on to start a company, and the Eli Lilly Genetic Medicine Grand Challenge was really one of the, sort of profound foundational milestones of our company. And obviously the money was good too, but we've met many people along the way from Eli Lilly. We continue to deal with Eli Lilly even today. And we're hoping to have, an established and more sophisticated partnership moving forward in the very near future.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Trey. Off to
Yep.
Jennifer.
So I'm Jennifer, one of the co-founders and the director of business development for Orion Therapeutics. So my background, I was a neuroscience PhD at Vanderbilt. We were one of the companies that applied, that was not affiliated with Nucleate, because at the time I was unaware of Nucleate, and Vanderbilt did not have a chapter yet, which I believe it just got one. So it's exciting to hear. I actually met Trey and our two other co-founders through an entrepreneurship competition in Tennessee. The technology came out of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And when I saw this potential as a platform for enabling multiple RNA therapeutics, I got very excited at this potential. So in the last, I guess, year of my PhD, I ended up working on Orion Therapeutics and eventually transitioned to working full-time with Orion Therapeutics, which is where we came across the Eli Lilly Genetic Grand Medicine Challenge. Again, I'll echo what Trey said here. This was really a kind of a formative experience for us. As we were pretty early stage in the company founding process, but it was huge just in terms of making connections, understanding kind of how these things work in the industry space, and just from the support that was provided both from the Nucleate team and Eli Lilly.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. And such a great story. And I was super excited to meet you guys in person at the challenge. And I think there's a couple of themes that you guys can, speak to here that would be helpful for the audience. So I think, the first thing, just to reiterate again, you guys did not have any affiliation with Nucleate at the time of the application. Yet, you came to the event, you were selected as one of the winners and had sort of value going there. So we definitely encourage, because we get that question a lot, it's a Nucleate Eli Lilly thing. People are like, do I have to be affiliated with Nucleate? Definitely not. And, Jennifer and Trey are a great example with Orion of, what sort of can happen when you apply to a competition like this one. So I guess maybe the first question I'd want to ask you guys is kind of like, at the stage when you applied to the competition, what was kind of the data package? Like, were you in vitro? Were you in vivo? What had you shown? And I guess the follow-up question would be sort of, where are you guys now, and how did that $100,000 grant sort of play into your development pipeline?
Oh, wow, man, how much time do we have here? So, as far as the data that we had, we had tons of in vitro data where we had essentially established our delivery system as a very potent delivery system for siRNA in vascular cell types. We had also decorated and tailored the delivery system to target not necessarily specific cell types, but specific tissue that is damaged. We actually have a collagen binding peptide. And we use collagen because in vascular injury, when the vessel is damaged, the subendothelial matrix is comprised of collagen. And so therefore, we're targeting that tissue via that binding motif. And so we had showed tons of data in vivo in our rat model of balloon angioplasty that we could actually target those specific injuries. What we did not have was a thorough proof of concept that we could actually inhibit disease processes of interest. And we do have that now. I would say that a portion of the Eli Lilly funds went towards that, just generally laying like the cement and foundation for some of those POC studies. But a lot of that was supported by the National Science Foundation as well with our phase 1 grant. We had 8 milestones in our phase 1 grant. We hit all of them. And we're actually getting some pretty good feedback here for our phase 2 submission that we just submitted in March. So that's sort of I could go on forever about where we're at. We've hit tons of scientific milestones as far as showing our delivery system and its potency in different cell types with mRNA and siRNA in vivo. We've shown fantastic toxicology profiles in mice, both from an immunogenicity and from a liver toxicity profile. We've shown fantastic pharmacokinetics with the ability to target. And then here recently, we've hit some milestones in collaboration with some CDMOs where we're showing that, we can take our little bench scale process with microfluidics, we can transfer that process to a CDMO where they make a much larger scale batch. They freeze it, ship it back to us. We test it. It works great. So, really hitting all the pillars of what you would expect in a typical platform technology in biotech. And so that's kind of like where the data was and how we were able to leverage it. Another aspect of what we're trying to do with our platform outside of just targeting vascular diseases, we want to show that our delivery system can get to many different previously inaccessible areas of the body. The area that Eli Lilly, not to be too presumptuous, but from the context of certainly our meeting and what is going on at Eli Lilly, it would seem that the blood-brain barrier and neuroscience and Alzheimer's, even more specifically, is of high interest to Eli Lilly. And so we started working with, Jennifer, at least a dozen different individuals from Eli Lilly in one form or another, and 2 individuals specifically Vanessa Barth and Michelle Lynn Hall have helped us actually design studies for blood-brain barrier targeting. And we've got some initial proof of principle data there that was helped to be developed by Eli Lilly as well. And so our hope is to actually start moving the platform into NHPs, into monkeys, and to move our lead asset into IND-enabling studies in pigs. And that is essentially the last benchmark that we've been given by Eli Lilly to move forward with a more formidable co-development partnership.
I will be.
That's amazing.
We were 2023 winners, so our data package comparatively then was much smaller. We've, with that time and a lot of other things happening, been able to generate a lot more data, but a lot of the milestones that we hit were just things that we wanted to do that we proposed as part of this challenge. So it is crazy to see how much that data package has changed since the competition.
Yeah,
100%.
and maybe one thing I would love to just throw in here, because I really want to make sure it gets said, and we don't not say this, but Oliver, you might not even be aware of this, but Cloverleaf Bio was another winner that year, and we're still working with them. So, and we met them at that competition. We've actually recently garnered some initial proof of concept data in vitro, where we can actually use their RNA modality towards cancer. So, a perfect example of how having these competitions, sometimes you end up getting rewards that you didn't even expect, right? Which is, sort of a small partnership with a biotech that sort of lifts both technologies with our working together. So it's the gift that keeps giving, the whole Eli Lilly Nucleate competition.
I'm super excited that you brought that up, Trey, because that actually was going to be one of my next questions. So I'm glad that you highlighted it. And actually, before we flip over to Jennifer, because I've got some questions for her about like what it was actually like to like go to the event and participate and all of that, I'd love to flip it back and just double click on something that you said, Trey, around, working with Lilly to design some of these proof of concept studies. And if I didn't hear you incorrectly, even like leveraging some of their scientific expertise and bandwidth to do so. Can you talk a little bit more about that and
Oh
maybe
yeah.
about the model they've developed for sort of non-traditional partnering through like Explore R&D and Catalyze 360?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So we connected with again Michelle Hall with Eli Lilly, and she is sort of she came out of Moderna before Eli Lilly. She's kind of a guru in drug delivery and all things delivery, right? Um, and so we met with her, and she asked me to tell her how we were going to conduct these blood-brain barrier studies. And then before I said it, she goes, a lot of people say they're going to do A, B, and C, and they're going to do this, and they're going to deliver luciferase to the brain. And she was like, don't do that. And I'm looking down at my notes. That was exactly what I was going to say, was what she said, don't do. So then she went on to say, it's okay. That's what everybody does. Don't worry. Here's what you need to do. You need to use this mouse model. This is what we're going to be looking for. And if you show success in this particular model, that's going to go 10 times further and impressing us and the external innovation teams for potential partnership than doing it the way you were going to do it. So she was very frank with us and upfront and told us exactly how we need to design the studies. And those studies are still ongoing today. So
Amazing. Yeah, just
yeah.
a great example of, I think, what can happen when you really get that sort of that mentorship and that direct connection to the folks that will be evaluating it right on the back end. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of folks in pharma, they wish that they could talk with every single person, a year, 2 years before they, believes they've created some data package that's going to lead to a partnership and give them that feedback. But, there's just so many people out there and it's really hard to create that mechanism. So I think like, this challenge is a great way for us to kind of pre-select the people that Lilly is excited to sort of invest that time in sort of upfront and really make sure that they can knock some years off your development timeline and put you in the right position for success. So really appreciate those insights, Trey. Maybe switching over to Jennifer for a second. Jennifer, could you tell us a little bit about what the experience was actually like at the challenge? Maybe what you expected going into it versus what you actually found was sort of most valuable on the other side, and can just talk a little bit, give people a little bit of color for sort of what this 2-day event is really like.
Sure. It was an absolutely incredible experience. So, Nucleate and Lilly brought our whole co-founding team, there, 4 of us, up to the campus, and we did a couple of kind of bonding activities, socializing activities, things like that on the first day, which was a fun and more casual introduction, I think. Certainly there's like an amount of nerves that you feel doing a competition like this. But honestly, it was a great experience. The second day, and I'm not sure if this structure has changed, but we did roundtables on the second day. We did a poster session. So there are lots of opportunities to actually get into the nitty-gritty of the science, talk to people from all different areas at Eli Lilly. I think Trey and I were both wowed at the people that we were talking to. And again, as he mentioned, a lot of those connections that we made gave us other connections in the future. And so it was really awesome just to talk to so many people. And then from that, at least in 2023, there was a selection of candidates from the poster sessions that actually got up and gave the presentation. And so we did that portion. I believe it was a 10-minute talk and time for questions with that. And so again, we got a lot of great feedback at every point along the competition. And I really think it is one of those things that even if you don't win the competition, the value of just the network that you build there will pay off for years to come. So that's the part I'd really reiterate. But the other sense that I got from Eli Lilly, and I think this has continued to stay true, is that they are very collaborative and very supportive. They want to see small companies succeed. So I have nothing but good things to say in that regard.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing your perspectives here. Now, I do want to open it up to the audience because I know people probably have a lot of questions. Some of the questions I might be better to answer. Other questions could be directed, directly at Trey and Jennifer, regarding their experience. So I would ask, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat, although I would prefer if you guys could unmute and ask them. I will answer them when they're in the chat, but it just makes it easier for everyone. If you're in a position to unmute, please do so. So before we get into the unmuting, though, Nikat did put some questions in the chat that I'm gonna run down. So the first was questions about the presentation. What in vivo data did you show, and did you speak in layman, or were you allowed to get into some technical language? That was the first question. So I don't know if you guys want to respond to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so there was three sort of phases to the presentation aspect of the visit. And so the first was the poster presentation. And so, and like I said, the in vivo data that we presented there was our rat model data using a balloon angioplasty, where we were showing essentially the ability to target delivery of RNA to the site of injury. That was that was sort of the coup de grace of the data that we showed in the poster. And then there was a roundtable session. And again, Oliver, I'm assuming you guys are using a similar model.
We'll
But
do a
then there was a
similar thing. Yeah.
roundtable session that honestly I found to be, like Jennifer said, even if you don't win the competition, like that's your time to really shine right there, because you're going to meet, um, hell, it had to be at least 30 people from Eli Lilly, from external innovation, from their investment arm, from scientific arm, from drug development, program directors, you name it. You're meeting those people, and that's your time to really, introduce yourself, make an impact. And even though you may not actually win the competition, that's where you're really developing relationships that can continue forward, for whatever that you may need. And then the final part, where they kind of constricted the pool down to 5 teams, was a presentation. Jennifer, I can let you talk about that. You gave that presentation. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess I hope that answered your question on the in vivo data part. With regards to the poster and the roundtable, I think you can get a lot more technical. I would probably say that we left the presentation itself a little more high level. I believe we had in there, and this has been 2 years ago, what we proposed to do with the funds as well. And maybe there was more that kind of touched on the company itself. So even if you haven't formed, maybe your plans as a company might be kind of relevant info to put in there. But I think it is important to kind of drive home the bigger picture with your technology. There will definitely be opportunities for them to dig into the technical side. And I think we got some
yeah,
more technical questions in the question time after the presentation. Um, yeah, I'm seeing some more questions. I don't know if you'll mind to answer those, Oliver, on that.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll direct them.
Okay.
So was there a mechanism of action slide? Did you have a graphical representation of your platform? Yes, I believe there was a description of the collagen targeting.
Yes.
And then 3, how did you start your pitch, and how did you grab people's attention? So I guess, yeah, maybe some suggestions for folks in the crowd around a good hook for presentations generally, and sort of how you guys positioned it.
yeah. Jennifer, I'll let you have the end on this, but uh, I guess the one thing I would say is, every presentation is equivalent to telling a story. And I would just make sure that, because I know one of the winners in our competition was very altruistic. There was very little scientific data, and there's this population of infants across the world, and she had a picture of an actual patient that she was helping, and I mean half the crowd was tearing up, and so hers was more of a pulling on the heartstrings. Ours was more of telling a story about how Orion Therapeutics can help move the genetic medicine uh, industry forward with our delivery technology, and how Eli Lilly can be a co-star in that. And so that's what I would recommend is, you know, tell your story about why your company exists and why it should exist and what problems you're solving, and how Eli Lilly can be a co-star in that story. Um, that would be my recommendation. Jennifer, what would you say?
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, you're going to have the advantage here that probably everyone at Eli Lilly is already going to understand the value of the technology that you're proposing. So, in this case, you really want to focus on what differentiates your technology, what kind of makes it special, how is it enabling something that's not currently enabled. So I agree with Trey
Yeah,
on that.
100%. There's a million different ways to tell a story, and it's different for every company. So I remember in the first year we had Cloverleaf with the tRNA therapeutic sort of modality. We had you guys with the novel nanoparticle, and then we had Julie Saba and Sphinxion Therapeutics with the rare genetic disease fix. So, by the way, if you're interested in hearing that sort of that version of the story, which was more emotionally centered and the research was earlier stage, Julie will be joining us in an info session next week, and you can check it out at the link tree and register. But just to speak very briefly on kind of, I think, some of the deliberation that happened in the room, behind the scenes, right? So for Eli Lilly, RNA therapeutics is a huge modality that they've been investing a lot in. So that coupled with the data that they were really impressed by with release delivery was kind of, I think, what got them really excited there. For Orion, I know that they were really excited to support a novel delivery technology because especially with all of these genetic medicine things and, blood-brain barrier targeting, Lilly knows delivery is a huge issue that no one's truly solved yet. So I think from that perspective, and you guys coming in with more data, that positioning was perfect, right? It was like, look, we have this delivery vehicle, we can do some delivery in some different tissues, partner with us to deliver all of the medicines that you're going to be developing, right, over the next 5-10 years that have delivery challenges to sort of do that. And then with Julie's story, I think there was an aspect of that where, it was a lot earlier stage and, she was playing on the heartstrings a little bit. But, and this is something that I helped sort of remind some of the judges about. Let's not forget, Dr. Julie Sabo, who's a pediatric oncologist at UCSF, clones and discovered every single gene in the sphingolipid pathway. So, and with what she had discovered in her patient population with these ultra rare sphingolipid disorders that can't be treated with enzyme replacement therapy like most other sphingolipid disorders can. So she had uncovered this new biology, of which she sort of pioneered the basic science around the pathway and had in vivo data showing that she could rescue that phenotype in mice. And she's targeting these ultra rare conditions, of which there's now, I think, 3 or 4. Back then, there was only one, but she was sort of discovering different versions of them. And I think that really spoke to Eli Lilly's sort of, genetic medicine aspect and also sort of a big thing that we're seeing now, with the N of 1 trials, right? With the first CRISPR patient delivering a personalized therapy, Eli Lilly, even 2 years ago, was sort of thinking ahead of the curve and thinking about how do we support these technologies that are going to go after these ultra rare indications with the gene therapy approach. So just to give a little bit of the sort of behind the scenes aspect there, I think, if that's helpful for folks to understand. And again, every story is different and you got to know how to position your story at the right time for the right partner with the right value proposition. I'm going to hand it off to Maya, who has a question.
Hello, good to see you again, Oliver. I had a question about whether there's any preference for rare versus common diseases. Specifically, my company is looking at an indication that is around 1 in 10,000 live births, and I'm wondering if there's a threshold for women's health diseases that Eli is targeting.
Yes. So the answer is no. I don't think there's an explicit threshold. Like I think 1 in 10,000 is even lower than some of the sphingolipid disorders. I mean, even higher than some of the sphingolipid disorders that Dr. Julie Sabo is working on. So I don't think there's an answer there discreetly. And I think, it's kind of depends on the strength of the science, the unmet need of the patient population, and kind of the intersection of those as it relates to Lilly's strategy. Cool. So are there any other questions that people have directly for Trey and Jennifer as it relates to Orion Therapeutics or the pitch competition that would be useful for you guys to hear?
A quick question. So in our case, we're working with an FDA approved API. We've sort of reformulated it for use in autoimmune disease. How did I'm trying to think of how to phrase it succinctly, is how much of a role, if any, did your understanding of the regulatory path and sort of that aspect of therapeutic development, delivery, all of that play into the competition as well as in maybe the mid, near, shorter and midterm experiments?
So I'm going to be frank with you. Today, 2025, we have a fantastic clinical plan and regulatory plan. We did not have such a thing back in 2023. So I would say it probably did not play a huge part considering the early stage nature of our company. Maybe what I would say is like, and I honestly can't remember, Jennifer, you might know better than me, but like, I think we do in a lot of our early presentations, we talked about the FDA regulatory environment around the general technology that we're developing, what they're looking for, and we sort of show the highlights of what we have today. That's about it. So I can't say that at that time we had a complete robust regulatory plan or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know that that was necessarily expected, but probably would emphasize that as early as you can be thinking about that, do be thinking about that. Sounds like if you've already got an API that's FDA approved, that's, that might be something that you want to highlight. So it's always good to know and be aware.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think, for instance, I think we talked about like the critical quality attributes that the FDA is looking for in nanoparticle delivery systems for genetic medicines. And then we talked about how when you scale up our delivery platform, we meet all of those critical quality attributes. Other than that, I don't know that we dug too deeply into regulatory aspects or anything.
awesome. Now I know we have a couple of hands raised. We're going to go with Chris and then Angelica. Before we take Chris's question, I just want to address a quick question in the chat. People are asking how the applications are judged. So when we get your application, the Nucleate team sort of does the first round of selection and feedback, and we prioritize the shortlist. That gets sent to Eli Lilly. They participate with us in understanding which applications are most exciting. We then schedule interviews on the Nucleate side with the teams and sort of interview each team, sort of feed that back into the application selection process.
I'm good.
And
How are you?
then, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to mute that person. Okay. And then when you actually get to the competition, there's 10 teams doing the sort of poster sessions, but typically we only have 3 or 5 teams take the stage to pitch for the actual prize. So in that first round of poster competitions, we've got people from Nucleate and people from Lilly kind of walking around and sort of understanding like what the prioritization process is going to look like to determine which teams are going to take the stage. Once the teams take the stage, the actual award selection is done by Nucleate because Eli Lilly's ethics and compliance don't essentially allow them to participate in that process. So at the end of the day, there's multiple rounds of selection. Eli Lilly is involved in all of the rounds until that last step, at which point it's just the Nucleate judging panel that makes that decision, obviously influenced by conversations and thought processes and our understanding of what Lilly's strategic interests are for the upcoming year. So I hope that answers some questions, and I'm sure it raises more, and I'll be happy to field those, but I'm going to pass it to Chris now.
Well, that actually kind of addresses, so you're sort of expecting a team maybe, but a little bit, it's more of a technical kind of question. Who on our team would be sort of required to be there? Me as a CSO, a CEO, but then do I need to bring my CSO on there and a few other people, or if I wasn't able to go, can just they go? Or, is there any requirements there about what the team is?
Yeah, no requirements this year because we have, first year, to be honest, we went a little bit over budget. So, now we're kind of in a world with the travel. So now we're in a world where for each team, we're accepting basically 2 people, all expenses paid. If you want to send someone else, no problem, as long as you guys can pay for it. I would suggest sending the CEO and the CSO if possible. If the CEO is not available, you could send the CSO and a business development leader, et cetera. So there are no hard requirements. And maybe I can just pivot it back to Jennifer to talk a little bit about what their strategy was when they attended.
Well, I guess so. We were in the first year. It was very nice
Oh,
to be
yeah,
able
you
to
sent
bring all
4.
4 of our team up there. If it had just been 2, then Trey and I would have been the attendees. For the most part, it was Trey and I that were handling the poster, and then I pitched for the competition there. So, yeah, I mean, I think 2 people. I probably bring someone that's scientific. And probably someone in the business development side or your CEO, something like that, I think would be a good mix.
Yeah, because don't be surprised if you do win or if things go well at the roundtable. Crystalline and Bill from who I don't think is at Eli Lilly anymore, but several people came up to us like right after, and they're talking, "Hey, how can we put together this project? How can we?" So science side is good, but you probably want somebody who can talk a little bit about maybe what your business model is and what you're looking for partnerships in the future and things like that.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to go to Angelica.
Hi. I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about the roundtable process into the presentation. So it sounds like there's poster session, selection round at that point, then a roundtable with up to like 30 people, and then a talk. But I'm very curious, like what the actual roundtable entails.
Yeah, imagine a very, very large ballroom with tons of round tables. And at each one of those tables is a couple of Eli Lilly representatives. They sort of grouped themselves based on where they were working and what they did. So like, you'd have 3 or 4 people from external innovation at one table. You would have a couple of guys from the external investment team at one table. I think there was like the CSO and a few scientific, so tons of tables, tons of different aspects, and they stayed put and you moved from table to table. The good news for us, because we were at 4 people or multiple people, we were kind of able to split up. And so we kind of were able to double dip a little bit. I don't think you'll be able to do that this year, it sounds like. But, essentially your 2-man team will just move from table to table and you just talk. You're just having general discussions and they ask you questions and field questions about your background and where you're from and the technology and all kinds of stuff. So that's where you kind of it's your time to shine with your personality, develop relationships, because we still talk to most of those individuals that we spoke with on that day at Eli Lilly.
Amazing. Okay, transitioning now to Anna. Oh, you're muted, Anna. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. While we're waiting for Anna to unmute, if she wants to ask her question, Iris asked, just to clarify, is a poster session roundtable and selection for 3 to 5 teams to pitch on stage? Yes, but the roundtable typically there's no like criteria for the roundtable. So you aren't like being actively judged during the roundtables. Now, some of the people at the roundtables are the people judging the posters, which, so there's obviously everything is tied together. But there's no like formal process coming out of the roundtables where there's like a ranking criteria. That's really only for the poster sessions, which determines who takes the main stage and then from the main stage to the winner. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
I had a question. I've talked to somebody who participates in judging from Eli Lilly, and they said if the revenue is coming soon, or they think something is going to be readily funded by the VC firm, they are probably not going to select this participant. So the person told me that they're looking for big ideas, big scientific ideas that are probably unlikely to get funding from other sources. So I was wondering do you know how practical the idea is? Or have you seen any participants that have more practical ideas or more like big picture?
Yeah, I mean, I would take that advice with a grain of salt, and I'm not sure exactly like who shared that information with you. I think that, people want the challenge is both for supporting impact and big idea things, and also as a direct mechanism by which Lilly is searching for early innovation that they're excited to in the future potentially partner with on their pipeline. So on the one hand, they're excited to give the award to folks where it's really going to make a lot of impact. But on the other hand, if you don't have a fundable business thesis, then, they can give you the money, but what's going to come from that if you're not going to be able to take that, further along. Let's remember it is $100,000, right? So, it takes like $1 billion in 10 years to develop a drug. So, at the end of the day, $100,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to what that technology is going to really need to raise around itself in order to get to a place where it's going to affect a patient. So I take that with a grain of salt, but I would say that in terms of the selection criteria for who the award is going to go to, sometimes there are decisions being made in the judging room where it's like, oh, we've got these like 3 great teams. Who do we give the award to? Okay, well, this team is coming out of MIT, right? And they've got a lot of data and they're absolutely going to they're going to leave this competition and go raise venture funding. Like they'll be fine. Like they don't need $100,000. Are we still interested in that team? Will we follow up with them? Absolutely, because they're going to go raise money and they have something that's exciting for our platform. So we're going to follow up with them versus a team where they might be doing great work, but maybe they're not as connected. Maybe they don't have as much traction, but Lilly believes that the money can have more of an impact. Then they might be like, okay, well, if we give it to that team, that's really where the impact is going to be felt by the $100,000, right? Does that mean that team doesn't have a solid science focused business thesis that is investable? Certainly not, right? They do. It's just that they're maybe at a bit of a disadvantage compared to someone coming out of Harvard or MIT, with all the connections in the world and a more solidified data package.
Thank you.
Okay, Yuri has a question.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the very detailed info session. Just a quick question about that grant. What can be spent on, and just how strict the conditions are? Like for the plan ahead, do you have to have some sort of study with determined endpoints that you were supposed to pitch first, or is that a little bit more open-ended, and then you can decide on the details of the research or what you can spend the grant on?
Yeah, I'll maybe answer briefly from the requirements side, and then Trey or Jennifer can pop in on sort of how they thought about positioning the sort of impact the funding would create for them. I think it's important to, in the slide deck, and maybe not even necessarily the one that you know, if you are selected and you go pitch, like definitely do it then. It would be great in the application as well, but it's not required. So maybe have a slide talking about like what that $100,000 is going to do for you guys, like why it's going to be impactful and like what it's going to unlock for you in your next step. In terms of requirements for use of the funding, it is fully unrestricted. In terms of reporting for the funding, you're reporting to us because we actually give you the money. So all we ask for is if you aren't incorporated yet, we ask for an update 6-9 months in. Again, you have 12 months to claim the award if you're not incorporated at the start of the competition. If you are incorporated and you get the transfer of funds right after the competition, we usually follow up about a year later, just asking for a report of like really like 3 pages, like how did you spend the money? Why was it impactful? You know, we've had people use the money to fund direct preclinical studies, had people use the money to fund salaries, had people use the money to fund legal, corporation costs, IP, really everything, marketing, right? Redoing their brands, redoing their slide decks. You can really use the funding for anything that you determine to be, you know, value inflection for your company. And there are no restrictions. And I'll pass it to the Orion team to add some color there.
Yeah, and once we spoke to a few members of the Eli Lilly team, Michelle being one of those that helped us sort of guide us on the study design, we had to put together a budget. I mean, if you've done anything for an NSF or NIH grant, this is like nothing compared to that. So they just wanted to see in general, you know, how you plan on spending the money, what milestones you hope to hit, and what studies you hope to complete. And I'm trying to think. I feel like I did write up a report on our studies and output, but we've had so many ongoing conversations with Lilly. It may have just been verbal. As far as, you know, we're still talking to them. So it's like the project that's just ongoing now. And so yeah, there's not many strings attached for sure.
Yeah, and just to comment on that briefly, I think in the context where you're being asked to like put together budgets and stuff, that was in the context of like having a discussion with Lilly around like what milestones what studies should we actually do? But as far as I recall, Trey, you know, Nucleate transferred you guys the funds without asking for any information.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
you don't
and
need
just to
that
be
even
clear,
at the
that
time
was
of getting
after.
the funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was well after the competition win and all that when we set up a budget. And I think, to be honest with you, I think they wanted to do it more of just an exercise, just to kind of get an idea of,
Yeah.
does this make sense that you're doing these studies with $100,000 and all that stuff? So, yeah.
Great, thank you. This is very helpful.
Amazing. Okay, it looks like thank you, Jennifer, for responding to that question in the chat. Are there any other questions out there specifically for Trey and Jennifer? If not, we can give them a little bit of time back on their calendar, and then I'm happy to stick around until 5:05 to answer individual or more specific questions. But maybe just one last call for questions for Orion Therapeutics.
I had a question in general. Could I just
Yeah,
chime in?
go ahead.
Okay. So one thing was all of the examples you gave had companies with in vivo data, and how can you give us more information on if you have in vitro data, how was that considered, or how would you envision like companies that have just pre in vivo data and looking for funds because yes, how would that be considered like a charters?
Great question. I would highly encourage you to check out the recording of our last info session with Jack Stahl from the RNA Incorporated. So when they applied, they only had in vitro data. They had no in vivo data. And actually they took the stage next to a clinical stage company. It was in clinic, I think phase 1-2 clinical trials, and they won the award. So I would watch that recording because Jack talks about that process and how when he saw the other team pitching, he was like, oh man, like I have no shot. But Lilly chose him with the in vitro proof of concept data for some really differentiated science over the clinical stage company. So definitely you can be in vitro proof of concept and still win this prize. And that's what happened last year.
Yeah. And I see a few other questions coming in, and I think I have a comment that kind of touches on answering a little bit of all of them. But it really is about the story you tell. I wouldn't feel discouraged if you only have in vitro data or something like that. But you wouldn't be applying to this competition unless you had some type of very savvy technology, right? And I would rest assured, surely that you didn't develop it overnight, right? And so tell that story. Why did you develop this technology? What was the problem you were incurring? Tell why you developed it. What's the overall value proposition of your company and the technology, and then hit the highlights and tell how the milestones you've hit. And if in vitro is all you've hit, then, sell it, really lean into it. Because Eli Lilly is going to be very forward thinking. They're not expecting you to have a commercialized drug at this thing. I can promise you. So like, you tell the story in a way that really tugs on their strings and what they're trying to do as a company, and give them the idea that, hey, we may be an early stage company, but that's a company that we can help fund and support, because down the line they're going to have many different solutions and value propositions that Eli Lilly can benefit from. I mean, I would really encourage. So it's really just all about the story you tell.
Yeah, and double click on that. Certainly. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to touch on that too, just because some of the comments here, we were based out of Tennessee. This is, it's kind of overwhelming to come to an event like this. This was really the first thing that Trey and I had done like this. So you're going to feel a little bit like nervous and overwhelmed by this, because you're going to be meeting a lot of people. And again, like, you really want to sell the potential of your technology, but you may not have all the data that you want at that point in time. So, but I think that it was a great experience to just kind of lean into it, and it'll pay off in the future. So I guess that was kind of the biggest challenge for us, was just going in with that mentality of we have a great technology here, and we believe it can really be something in the future. So
Definitely. Great. Okay. Well, on that note, I think that's a great note to end on for our session here today with Trey and Jennifer from Orion Therapeutics. Thank you guys so much for your time, for coming out here to tell the Nucleate Lilly Grand Challenge curious about the competition and why they should apply. And congratulations on all the things that you guys have achieved, and looking forward to what's next for you guys in your journey. So thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back maybe next year to talk to a new set of people about, the experience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Oliver. Good luck to everyone. And
yeah, good luck.
look forward to seeing what goes on there.
Awesome.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.